Welcome. In today's talk, Jonathan tastes honey, or how small actions can have severe consequences. Jonathan, the son of Saul, was the hero of the battle at Michmash. Trusting in God to protect him, he mounted an assault on a great army with just one man, his companion, to support him in battle. And the result was that the army of the Philistines ran away. Saul, his father, the king, seeing this, gathered together his men and immediately started to chase after the enemy. And many other men who'd not been in the army joined them, so that Israel was again fighting against the Philistines as the Philistines tried to flee away from them. We're looking today at the first book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 14. We looked last week at the first half of the chapter. Today we're looking at the section that begins at verse 24. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. I present these talks on how to understand the King James Bible, looking usually at a complete chapter each time. Today, though, we're splitting the chapter and we're looking at the first book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 14 and verses 24 to 52. So, Jonathan was the hero of the battle, and Saul's soldiers were chasing after the Philistines. You cannot imagine how difficult, how exhausting that was. Not only are these men farm labourers having to chase after and kill other men, their enemies, they're doing this constantly throughout the day without a pause even to eat or to drink. Every moment is devoted to this chase. A moment's lack of attention, hesitation, uncertainty, and the enemy can turn on them and they can find themselves severely injured or dead. It takes so much attention, so much fear, so much exhaustion, so much exhilaration. But Saul had, as a powerful leader, given them powerful instructions before that battle. So we're starting at verse 24, 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 24. And the men of Israel were distressed that day. In other words, they were totally exhausted. They've spent the whole day chasing after their enemies with this enormous level of activity and emotional intensity. But they were exhausted, particularly because Saul had adjured the people, saying, Cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening, that I may be avenged on mine enemies. So none of the people tasted any food. Saul adjured the people. To adjure means to force someone to take an oath, to make a serious promise in front of God. Okay, so what's Saul's promise? Cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening, that I may be avenged on mine enemies. I'm performing this great act of vengeance against the Philistines. Therefore, if any man in my army eats any food, then may God's curse be upon him. May God punish that man. That's what Saul has said to the people, the men, his soldiers, as they went into battle. And presumably they all replied, Amen to it. They declared that God would be their witness. They too, like Saul, would not eat any food until the evening of that day, because they had to devote themselves to the battle. That was the oath that Saul forced the people to take. They made that promise, and God was their witness. God's judgment would be against them if they ate any food, even if they did it in secret, So what's the proper use then of adjuring in that way? Well, if I give you an example from a different field of life, a judge in a court of law, he adjures the witnesses. He, if we took the same form as Saul did, he would say to the witnesses in the court, "Cursed be anyone who tells lies in this court." And then the people, as they responded to acknowledge and to accept that God was their witness, they would know that God's judgment would be against them in a special way and in a severe way if they told lies in court. That would be a proper use of adjuring, forcing someone to take an oath. Was Saul doing that properly? He did it because he had to stir up the people. He had to stir them up to be as eager and as zealous in the battle as he was. But was he right to do that? Well, whether he was right or not, the people took it very seriously, because none of his soldiers ate anything that day. For all their exhaustion, for all the fact that they were terribly distressed, they ate nothing. And then there came a temptation before them. Verse 25. And all they of the land came to a wood, and there was honey upon the ground. All they of the land, everyone who belonged to Israel, all the soldiers who belonged to Israel in chasing after the Philistines, came out of the open land, and they came into a wooded area where there were bees, and there was honey upon the ground. It just simply means in that place there was honey, and they were aware of it. There were bees there, there was honey there, and they were feeling weak and hungry and desperate in the course of the battle, because the battle was moving through this wooded area, and they were still chasing after the Philistines. Verse 26, and when the people were coming to the wood, behold, the honey dropped. So the honey is flowing, it's ready, it's coming out of the honeycombs. The people are aware of it, but, the end of verse 26, no man put his hand to his mouth, no man picked up some honey and tasted it on his hand. For the people feared the oath. They were afraid. They knew that they'd made a serious promise in front of God because their king had told them to do it. Verse 27 contains our problem for the day. But Jonathan heard not when his father charged the people with the oath. We know why Jonathan didn't hear. It was because he wasn't with the rest of the army at that time. He'd gone ahead of them, unknown to them, to fight against the Philistines. So when Saul decided to take the men into battle, chasing after the Philistines, Jonathan was already in that battle. Wherefore, for which reason, he put forth the end of the rod that was in his hand, and dipped it in an honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes were enlightened. So Jonathan did not stop to collect honey. He didn't do anything like that. As he moved along, he took a rod that he was holding, he dipped it into a honeycomb that he passed. And then he took the honey off the end of his stick, put it into his mouth, like you might put a sweet into your mouth. And suddenly he's refreshed. Suddenly that weariness lifts off him. Just the taste of honey causes his eyes to brighten up. He's got energy to continue the battle, to continue the fight. Jonathan did not know about that oath. He was acting, we could say, in innocence, unaware that he was doing anything wrong. But the people who were with Jonathan and under Jonathan's command, they knew about the oath. Verse 28. Then answered one of the people, one of the soldiers, and said, Thy father straitly charged the people with an oath, saying, Cursed be the man that eateth any food this day. And the people were faint. It was a command of your father, says the soldier. Your father gave us strict instructions. He made us swear an oath, make a serious promise in front of God that God's curse, God's judgment will be against the person who ate any food this day. That's why all of this army are faint and weak in this difficult battle. That's why they're so weary. But now you've broken that oath, Jonathan. Now you've not obeyed your father's instruction. Verse 29, Jonathan replies. And in his reply, he gives us a real ethical problem. Is Jonathan doing the right thing or the wrong thing? His answer is defiant. Then said Jonathan, My father hath troubled the land. See, I pray you, how mine eyes have been enlightened, because I tasted a little of this honey. My father's caused this trouble to God's people, to Israel's people. Look, I pray you. I pray you doesn't mean prayer as in prayer to God. It means please. Look, please. He's talking to the soldier. Look, please. I ate a little of the honey and my eyes have lightened up. I ate a little of this honey, the tiniest bit, and I no longer feel exhausted. If only the people had done the same thing, wishes Jonathan. Verse 30. How much more, if haply the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found. If haply, if it so happened that the people had eaten freely of the spoil of their enemies. The spoil is the things they've taken from their enemies. The cattle and the sheep and the goats, which their enemies have left behind in this great race to get away from Israel's army. The people found that spoil. They found those animals. And if it so happened that the people had eaten that meat freely today, they wouldn't be weak and weary and faint. They would fight with valour and strength. And he concludes, For had there not been now a much greater slaughter amongst the Philistines? Would it not be that so many more people would have been killed in the enemy army if Israel's army were strong? Saul's acted unwisely, argues Jonathan. He should have never made the people make that promise in front of God. Okay, Jonathan is defiant, and so his innocent mistake has become a much more serious matter. And we could question, doesn't it say in the scriptures, honour thy father and thy mother? Is Jonathan honouring his father? In fact, his father is the king of Israel, and don't all Israel's people have a duty to honour their king? And so, at the one level, Jonathan's words are wrong, but there is another level in which they're right, because Jonathan is motivated by love for the people. In this, Jonathan is like David, who became the king after Saul, his friend, as he would be later on. Jonathan has the same attitudes as David. David loved the people whom he led. He cared for them intensely, and so does Jonathan. He wants the army to be strong, to be able to fight their battle. He cares about them. Saul, on the other hand, Jonathan's father, has an opposite sort of attitude. He thinks that the role of a leader is to be fierce and to be strong and to drive the people not by love but by fear. How curious. Opposite attitudes, father and son. And Jonathan is proved right in his judgment that Saul, his father, has acted unwisely, as we discover very soon, and as Saul will discover very soon. Verse 31. And they smote the Philistines that day from Michmash to Aijalon, and the people were very faint. So this chase is succeeding. Israel's army is managing to catch and kill members of the Philistines' army. The battle moves on from Michmash, where it began, to Aijalon, and it will move on further that day. And this happens even though the people, that is the people in Israel's army, are very faint, very weak, very weary, because they've not eaten. And so evening comes, and evening means the end of this promise that Saul has forced the people to make. And with the evening, the people are now desperate for food. They're absolutely worn out after this battle, and they are starving. Verse 32. And the people flew upon the spoil. Very graphic way of saying that they went directly to the animals they'd taken to kill them and to eat them. And they took sheep and oxen and calves. Oxen are the same kind of animals as cows are and bulls today, and slew them on the ground, and the people did eat them with the blood. So they killed them there and then at once. We don't know whether they even stopped to cook them. If they did, there's no record of it. They just ate the meat because they were so famished, and they ate them with the blood. Okay, this eating with the blood is a severe problem. It breaches the rules that God has given to Israel's people about the meat that they're to eat. In particular, Leviticus chapter 17, verses 10 to 14, direct that Israel's people must not eat food with the blood in it. When they kill an animal for the purpose of meat, they're to drain the blood from it before they cook it and eat it. And Saul becomes aware of this, and he's worried by it. Verse 33, Then they told Saul, saying, Behold, the people sin against the Lord, in that they eat with the blood. And he said, Ye have transgressed, you've done the wrong thing. Roll a great stone unto me this day. Why? Because Saul, who works by fear, is also a man who is afraid. He is afraid of God's anger. He is afraid that the people, in disobeying God's law, have caused God to be angry. And if God is angry with Saul and his army, then God might act against them. So urgently, Saul sets about setting right this mistake. He orders a great stone, a huge rock, to be rolled out in front of the people, and the purpose of that stone to be the place of slaughter. From now on, they're not to kill the animals just on the ground where they find them. They're to take those animals to that stone, and they're to sacrifice them, or rather kill them there, so that it can be observed and so that they can make sure that people are obeying the kosher rules and obeying the rules about draining out the blood and not eating the blood. And Saul gives an instruction to that end in verse 34. And Saul said, Disperse yourselves among the people. That's his instruction to the soldiers near to him. They're to go out right through the crowd of men who are supporting Saul in battle, his soldiers, and say unto them, Bring me hither every man his ox and every man his sheep, and slay them here and eat, and sin not against the Lord in eating with the blood. And all the people brought every man his ox with them that night, and slew them there. So at last the people settled down for a great feast, and a feast in accordance with the kosher rules. And Saul carries out an act of devotion to God, the first time he'd done so in this way. Verse 35. And Saul built an altar unto the Lord. The same was the first altar that he built unto the Lord. So this is not now just a place for slaughter of animals for food. It's a place of sacrifice where Saul is going to offer animals to God in devotion to God. And these were built of stones. And probably that first rock which was brought out for the people to kill the animals on, that was the starting place for building this great altar to worship God in that place. But Saul doesn't just intend to give a sacrifice in worship that night and for the people to eat their meat. He's fierce. He wants to continue that battle. He thinks that if he continues that battle, now the people are refreshed by food through the night, that there can be a truly tremendous victory. Verse 36. And Saul said, Let us go down after the Philistines by night, and spoil them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. If we continue, we can have a total victory. We can destroy the Philistine army entirely. And they, the army of Saul, said, Do whatsoever seemeth good unto thee. Whatever seems good to you, we'll do it. We're in agreement. Then said the priest, verse 3, that's Abiah, the chief priest of Israel, Let us draw near hither unto God. You've built an altar. Let's pray to God. Let's get God to guide us before we attempt continuing the battle this evening. Verse 37. And Saul asked counsel of God. He asked God's advice. Shall I go down after the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into the hand of Israel? Should I continue this chase after the Philistines? Because it's only worth doing, God, if you hand them over to defeat. End of verse 37. But he, God, answered him, Saul, not that day. So that day, or rather that night, as we've seen, Saul didn't get an answer from God. There was no answer. And we don't know how Saul expected to receive that answer, but it was clear enough to him there was no answer, and the reason also was clear to him. There must be the guilt of some sin that's fallen upon Israel. Someone must have been guilty of offending God in some way. That is the reason why God has not answered Saul's prayer. Verse 38, And Saul said, Draw ye near hither, come here, all the chief of the people, the leaders, and know and see wherein this sin hath been this day. For, as the Lord liveth, which saveth Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. Saul's made another oath this time. He didn't explain what should happen when he made his original oath, Cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening. He didn't explain what should happen if anyone disobeyed that. But now Saul's made another oath, a promise to God as certain as the fact that God who saves Israel is alive. He's promised that even if Jonathan, his son, is the guilty person, Jonathan will die. End of verse 39. But there was not a man among all the people that answered him. Why did they not answer? Was it because they were so terrified at such a fierce statement that Saul was willing to kill his elder son as a punishment for sin? Or was it because they knew what Jonathan had done in the field of battle when Jonathan had, in defiance of Saul's curse, tasted the honey? Then said he unto all Israel, Be ye on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side. And the people said unto Saul, Do what seemeth good unto thee. Whatever you think's right, we'll do. Then Saul said unto the Lord God of Israel, Give a perfect lot. Declare to us what the truth is in this matter." And Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. So it's either Saul or Jonathan who is the guilty person. Verse 42. And Saul said, "Cast lots between me and Jonathan, my son." And Jonathan was taken. Verse 43. Then Saul said to Jonathan, "Tell me what thou hast done." And Jonathan told him and said, "I did but taste a little honey with the end of the rod that was in mine hand, and lo, I must die." Jonathan declares his own punishment. And in reaction to those terrible words, another oath, an even more terrible oath from Saul. And Saul answered, "God do so and more also." Increasing the punishment, making it even worse. "For thou shalt surely die, Jonathan. May there be more and greater evils if Jonathan is not killed." Do we have to perform our promises? What about when our promises are wrong? What about when our promises are evil? And who will be the judge of those promises? If Saul is the chief judge in Israel, who can speak against him and show him that he's wrong? Well, the whole of Saul's army spoke against him and declared that he was wrong. Verse 45. And the people said unto Saul, "Shall Jonathan die, who hath wrought this great salvation in Israel?" Jonathan has wrought salvation. Wrought means worked. He's worked salvation. Salvation means rescue. Jonathan has rescued Israel this day. Is it really so that Jonathan will die? And then they make their own oath. God forbid. As the Lord liveth, as certain as the fact that God lives, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground. Not only is Jonathan not going to die, he's not going to lose a single hair of his head. Why? For he hath wrought with God this day. If Jonathan had tasted that honey selfishly, then maybe he would deserve his punishment. If he were working for himself, maybe that punishment would not matter. But in this day, on this day of all days, when Jonathan has wrought with God, when he's worked with God, when he's been doing the work of God, when he's so powerfully trusting and obeying God, when he's shown his faith before God, and approaching a vast army with only one man in support of him. And God has upheld him, and God has supported him every step of the way. Will we agree to Jonathan dying? No, Saul. You've got to change your mind. You've got to find it in yourself to forgive Jonathan and to repent of these wrong oaths that you have been making. Jonathan has worked with God, and even if his action in tasting honey and speaking against his father was wrong, nevertheless, Jonathan must be saved. So the people rescued Jonathan, that he died not. And the effect of this was that Saul gave up that battle that day. Verse 46. Then Saul went up from following the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. Saul didn't try to destroy their entire army that night. The Philistines returned home, and battles would continue with the Philistines for the entire history of Saul's rule over Israel. Verse 47 gives an account of Saul's rule. So Saul took the kingdom over Israel and fought against his enemies on every side, against Moab and against the children of Ammon and against Edom and against the kings of Zobah. So many enemies on every side of Israel. And Saul defended Israel during the years of his rule against them, and against the Philistines too. And whithersoever he turned himself, he vexed them. Literally, the Hebrew word there for vexed is he acted wickedly towards them. It really means he troubled them. He caused trouble for them. He didn't defeat them totally, but he caused them trouble for as long as he ruled. And in this way, he defended Israel. Verse 48, and he gathered an host, an army, and smote the Amalekites, and delivered Israel out of the hands of them that spoiled them. So he attacked the Amalekites, who were desert robbers, and they'd so often spoiled or robbed from Israel that Saul delivered them out of the hands of that enemy. The account of that we'll be reading in the next chapter, chapter 15. It wasn't a total victory over Amalek, but it was a major victory. And now an account of Saul's government. Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan and Ishui and Melchishua. Ishui is elsewhere called Aminadab. Saul had one son in addition to those, Ishbosheth, who ruled part of Israel after him, 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 8 to 10. And the names, we continue with verse 49, of his two daughters were these: the name of the firstborn, Merab, and the name of the younger, Michal, who became the first wife of King David. And the name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. That's the beginning of verse 50. Saul also had a mistress, another lady with which he had two sons, called Rizpah, 2 Samuel chapter 21 and verse 8. Continuing the account of Saul's army, the end of verse 50. And the name of the captain of his host, his army, was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. We'll be hearing much more about him later on. Verse 51, and Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. 52. And there was sore war against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he took him unto him. Saul was always looking for strong men or for brave men for his army because of this continuous war against the Philistines, a war in which Saul eventually died, and he died in battle with his three sons, the three sons who are named in verse 49. More about Saul's rule and the events that caused God to reject Saul in our next talk, when I trust we'll be looking at the first book of Samuel chapter 15. In a moment I'm going to read you 1 Samuel chapter 14, the passage that we've been studying today. First, my email address, it's 333kjv@gmail.com. That's 333kjv@gmail.com. And now from the King James Version of the Bible, here is 1 Samuel, first book of Samuel, chapter 14, beginning at verse 24. And the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had adjured the people, saying, Cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening, that I may be avenged on mine enemies. So none of the people tasted any food. And all they of the land came to a wood, and there was honey upon the ground. And when the people were come into the wood, behold, the honey dropped, but no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan heard not when his father charged the people with the oath. Wherefore he put forth the end of the rod that was in his hand, and dipped it in an honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes were enlightened. Then answered one of the people and said, Thy father straitly charged the people with an oath, saying, Cursed be the man that eateth any food this day. And the people were faint. Then said Jonathan, My father hath troubled the land. See, I pray you, how mine eyes have been enlightened, because I tasted a little of this honey. How much more, if haply the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies which they found? For had there not been now a much greater slaughter among the Philistines? And they smote the Philistines that day from Michmash to Aijalon, and the people were very faint. And the people flew upon the spoil, and took sheep and oxen and calves, and slew them on the ground, and the people did eat them with the blood. Then they told Saul, saying, Behold, the people sin against the Lord, in that they eat with the blood. And he said, Ye have transgressed. Roll a great stone unto me this day. And Saul said, Disperse yourselves among the people, and say unto them, Bring me hither every man his ox, and every man his sheep, and slay them here and eat, and sin not against the Lord in eating with the blood. And all the people brought every man his ox with him that night, and slew them there. And Saul built an altar unto the Lord. The same was the first altar that he built unto the Lord. And Saul said, Let us go down after the Philistines by night, and spoil them until the morning light. And they said, Do whatsoever seemeth good unto thee. Then said the priest, Let us draw near hither unto God. And Saul asked counsel of God, Shall I go down after the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he answered him not that day. And Saul said, Draw ye near hither, all the chief of the people, and know and see wherein this sin hath been this day. For as the Lord liveth, which saveth Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. But there was not a man among all the people that answered him. Then said he unto all Israel, Be ye on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side. And the people said unto Saul, Do what seemeth good unto thee. Therefore Saul said unto the Lord God of Israel, Give a perfect lot. And Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. And Saul said, Cast lots between me and Jonathan my son. And Jonathan was taken. Then said Saul to Jonathan, Tell me what thou hast done. And Jonathan told him, and said, I did but taste a little honey with the end of the rod that was in mine hand, and lo, I must die. And Saul answered, God do so, and more also, for thou shalt surely die, Jonathan. And the people said unto Saul, Shall Jonathan die, who hath wrought this great salvation in Israel? God forbid. As the Lord liveth, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he hath wrought with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan, that he died not. Then Saul went up from following the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. So Saul took the kingdom over Israel, and fought against all his enemies on every side. against Moab, and against the children of Ammon, and against Edom, and against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. And whithersoever he turned himself, he vexed them. And he gathered an host, and smote the Amalekites, and delivered Israel out of the hands of them that spoiled them. Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan, and Ishui, and Melchishua, and the names of his 2 daughters were these: the name of the firstborn, Merab, and the name of the younger, Michal. And the name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz, and the name of the captain of his host was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. And Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. And there was sore war against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he took him unto him.